Welcome back to Ma's Garage.
With Crick
and Smokey
and Kev.
We've been doing a lot of talking. We've been doing a lot of talking about what should we be talking about today, and we're kind of thinking like nowadays you don't really see a lot of it, so it might not be a bad thing to talk about. And we're going to talk about acceptance and accountability.
Like all of us having accountability for coming up with the intro for this show at some point.
At some point, I mean, we'll get there.
We own it, though. We own it.
We will get there. But essentially, the idea was just to kind of talk about like examples that like something that either like you could have taken accountability but chose not to, as well as things that you chose to take accountability upon yourself for, the differences in between. So if you guys have some stories that you want to share, some things immediately come to mind.
Well, first, because this started, I forgot exactly what I said to you, but I said something that kind of brought this about, but you had brought it together by saying the word accountability. So could you real quick kind of define what accountability means to you and in the most just basic terms?
Accountability, basically, to me personally, accountability means taking responsibility and following through on your word if you say that you are going to do something per se, and as opposed to making an excuse as to why you could not, even if there were factors that were outside of your control. Owning that not everything is perfect, and then learning for the next time and learning what to do differently.
It's like the old saying, a man is only as good as his word, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. When's the last time you heard about someone's word lately? You know, like no one cherishes their word no more, or what it's good for.
Not as much, because nowadays people are quick to say either, oh yeah, absolutely, I can help out, and then they don't show up, or it'll be the opposite. They just won't even try to help you because they don't even want to try to make the concerted effort of valuing your time as opposed to theirs.
Well, and they spend or even myself, you know, sometimes before I was able to take control of it, we spend just as much time coming up with excuses and coming up with reasons why we can't do something that, you know, getting our way of doing it in the first place. Like that excuse right there is something that you have to watch out for, because it's so easy to it's not as easy as you think to come up with an excuse that's actually valid, that's actually a good reason. And like, even to yourself, we make excuses all the time for things that we want to do, you know, and it's holding yourself accountable and saying, yeah, that's an excuse and that might work, but that's not what I really believe. That's not a good enough excuse to stop me from doing this.
Right. Like, why tell yourself to stop doing something that at one point you wanted to try to do, but now you're trying to find reasons why you're finding reasons to not make time for yourself. It's kind of what it seems like, you know?
And realistically, what you feel is important to you, you will make time for, in terms of time management, in terms of balancing priorities. And that's, at the end of the day, that's how it's going to speak. Yes, there's going to be factors that get in the way that you're not going to be able to do 100%. That's where the learning comes. It's where you don't just fall on, oh, well, I got stuck at this red light. Oh, well, I got stuck 2 hours behind the train. Like, yes, those things happened, but now you know about those things so that the next time you know how to plan around them.
But even to those, you know, those are legit excuses, like you said, you know, those are real things. But if it's something as simple as starting something that you want to try, or finding reasons to not even try to start it, like you're giving yourself reasons why it's going to fail before you even give it a chance to start.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, I don't have this tool, or I don't have the space to do it, or I don't have this, or you know, whatever else that you can come up with, you can give yourself to not do it. And what I found with that for myself lately is, as soon as I hear myself saying those or thinking those, I start knocking that off. Well, what's your excuse now? Why can't you do it now? What, you know, and then as soon as you knock enough of those off, you're like, well, crap, I got to do it. Like, I have no other excuses.
Yeah, no kidding.
You know, and like what
Like,
really helped
Mhm.
ingrain that for me is the project that I did for that. It's what I've learned from doing my own maintenance as well, is because like when you take a job on for yourself, where like you're not under anybody else, it's your solo business, you have nobody to turn to pick up the slack. There's nobody else that you can
Mhm.
like walk away and someone's going to finish this, or, you know, you can't do that. Like there's no one to turn on. It's on you. And that's a very like, for me, it was a very scary feeling at first. It was a very like overwhelming feeling that, oh my God, I got to get this done and I got to do it right. And if I don't do it, this will not get done. And like, once you get over that, you know what I mean? And hold yourself accountable and, okay, where's my work ethic? What do I believe in? Why am I doing this in the first place?
You start to build that
That's how you can
foundation.
you know, correct, you know, and just overwork those excuses and those negative thoughts and everything else that your mind's going to throw at you, or other people are going to throw at you, you know, and just because once you start doing it, you're doing it, and you can, that stuff will slowly fade away.
I think with a lot of that too, though, and this is where the accountability comes in, is, you know, you can get asked to do a lot of things from a lot of different people, and the level of information of what they're asking of you will vary greatly. So some people, you know, will give you jack for information, but you don't know that. So it's all about how you lay out all of the stuff that you're trying to accomplish too. You know, how does it make sense in your head to try to knock these things off the list to
Right.
get started? I know with you, it's
What are your
whiteboards
limitations?
is huge, right? That too.
Yes.
That too, because
Like
then you
just
start to
seeing it
see.
all.
Yeah, that was the biggest
Yeah.
thing for me. Once I started writing stuff down and actually visibly seeing stuff and what it took to do the stuff, you know, especially some of these things that are just so daunting. It's like, well, that's only 3 lines on that paper. Is it really that big of a deal? Is it really that bad?
Right.
Right. Yeah, and a lot
What-
of the
it's the
most
realization in
successful
general,
people talk
too, is
about like
like-
writing down things in terms of like making things smaller than they are, so that you can just kind of work towards like knocking them even smaller to the point that they're nothing.
Exactly. And, you know, I mean, it's just like making excuses. How many times do we make something out to be so much bigger than it even needs to be? You know, it's like you and I were talking a few weeks ago at my work, and I was stressing out all day because I had to get this quote to match perfect for my job, and I was off 0.5 of a penny. Not even. Yeah, 0.5 of a penny or something like that.
Something
It
that
was
multiple
nothing. It was nothing.
factors add up to it.
Exactly. It's nothing in the end. I could have just fudged one other thing to make it work, but I was in my head like, what's not working right? What's not communicating? Why isn't this functioning correctly?
Yeah, because at the end of the day, those issues still exist. Like no matter what, you fudge it. Yes, you fudged it. You know that you fudged it. Whoever that you're presenting it to may or may not know that you fudged it.
And they may or may not care, but it's my mistake.
Right.
My mistake.
And especially when you're working with like a corporation where there's going to be other ramifications and actions that come from your activity.
Right. And, you know, I think that depends a lot on the company you work for. Is it an employer that makes you feel like you need to walk on eggshells? You know, any little slip up, you're gone? Or is it someone who is understandable? Is it someone who doesn't give a shit? You know,
Or
there's a lot of varying
Are
results.
they accountable?
Exactly.
Is your job accountable? Are they accountable as a company themselves for the employees that work for them?
Exactly. And that almost
You know, that's a
creates a
question
trickle
that
down.
I've asked, you know, had to ask myself about the places I work for.
And that's contagious. I see that in
Yeah.
a lot of places where you get that trickle down accountability.
Absolutely.
And if the person on top doesn't make any mistakes, you better believe everybody underneath them doesn't. And they'll make sure somebody else makes the mistake.
Yeah.
You know, then you've got those cutthroat situations, and it's like, holy cow.
Right.
Well, then it just comes down to
Well, and that's,
knowing how to
that's
react.
Some standards of a good manager, if you can hold yourself like accountable, like.
But it's a huge thing.
Yeah.
Honesty.
And what you do yourself, like the standard, how you hold yourself.
It's the dumbest interview question. Are you an honest person? You're going to get the same answer from everyone. Even a dishonest person is going to give you the same answer. Of course, they're going to say yes.
I don't know if I've actually had that question in interviews that I've had.
I don't think so either. I think it probably used to be in a lot more, but
that's where, from giving interviews, though, the way you learn you want to get the actual answer you want is by not asking the exact question. You have to catch people off guard to get what they really mean and ask things in roundabout ways. And it's like, because they're trying to please you. You know what I mean? And you know that, and they know that. That's why they're dressing nice. That's why they're not dressing like how they're going to dress every single day. Like, and there's a lot that goes into
and
that.
That's why a lot of people put a lot of preparation into interviews, like especially like working with recruiters. They're hitting you with like these example interview or interview question examples that are basically very similar to like the questions that are going to be asked in the interview, so that you know how to respond, and they're making sure that you're giving a response that is going to be favorable. And if you give a response that's not favorable, they're going to give you counseling. They're going to say, okay, I understand what you're saying, but I think if we tweak it and we go a little bit this way, it'll sound a little bit more favorable. I mean, at the end of the day, they're trying to help you. And if you may not be giving 100% honesty in your opinion, just understand that you're giving,
that's a reflection, right?
You're basically just giving them what they want to hear. And then when you're in is when it's your control, and you can basically like, you can stay as the person that interviewed, or you can be you, if there is a difference.
Right. Are you a man of your word or a person of your word? You know, like, are you who you say you are?
Yeah. But if you have to tell them what they want to hear to get in the first place, right?
Well, I mean, even if you're telling the complete honesty about yourself, you can still only be telling the parts of you that you want to hear. You're not going to talk about all your flaws. Everybody has flaws, but no manager wants to sit there and hear about the person they're about to hire.
You're not.
Most even when they train you. Most times the interviewer is asking you about like your experiences, and they want to know like how you reacted in certain situations, so that they have a better understanding of like how you react when like things happen. Like, they know that you're going to be able to handle high stress, and they want to hear about like how you've handled high stress in the past.
Right. But there's also the one of, what's the common one asked every time, what are your 3 greatest strengths and your 3 greatest weaknesses? You know, that's which is asked a lot in interviews.
I haven't had that one in a while.
Really? And it's like, the thing is because, and I like that you hear a reflection of what someone thought of themselves. You know what I mean? But prep to answer question is that your weaknesses are secretly strengths. You know what I mean? You want to give weaknesses that are weaknesses, but it's like, I take my job too seriously and things like that. And like, but that's not how I answer. Someone
that puts a lot of focus into what they're currently doing.
Mm-hmm.
Someone that puts too much focus into what they're doing, that they're not catching other things happening. That's definition of, I take my job too seriously.
Right. And it's just, it goes back to character. You know what I mean? Like, character is who you are, like, when no one else is around. You know, like, that's like you holding yourself accountable to yourself. Like, that's like if you're walking down a nature path and you see a wrapper on the ground and no one sees, do you pick it up and throw it in the garbage, or you just keep walking? You know what I mean? Where do you stand on that as a person when nobody else is looking?
I hate seeing garbage in nature.
Same. The rule my mom always taught me is leave it better than how you found it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, leave everywhere better how
that's literally that's the way that we were brought up, and I think it's also part of the fact that they didn't want to clean up after us. But I mean, like, at the end of the day, I mean, we should be cleaning things as we leave. Like, I feel bad if I'm at like a place and like they don't want my help to clean. They're like, oh no, you can leave. We're gonna get it. It's like, you gave me like we all did this together. Like, please, like, the least I can do is at least help. But like, if they don't want me, I'm not going to push it anymore.
Right.
Because then you do have people that like just start to clean up, and then I've been there where like I had to clean up after a party, and I thought like my 2 or 3 people that were like chilling at the time were gonna help. But then like as soon as shit hit the fan and like the house owner was on his way home, and they're like, oh no, we gotta go. And I'm like, oh, so I gotta clean this
Oh,
whole thing by myself. And yep, I mean, I cleaned it up as much as I could. And when he got home, he could tell that I had just gotten done doing a ton of cleaning in his house. So yeah, he kind of I didn't exactly hide the fact that I had just thrown a party the night before. He wasn't
but you're
he
showing the
wasn't
fact that
he
he can
wasn't
trust you to
he
take care of
wasn't
it.
thrilled, but he did say that it would have been a lot better if he said it would have been 4 times better that the way that he came home, as opposed to he came home and nothing was cleaned up. And that could have been grounds for like me no longer living there, because that would have just been messed up. Because that's like someone completely disrespecting the place that they're living in, like having a
Right.
party and then
Right.
not even cleaning it up after.
No, not taking care of your mess, like not taking care of what you've done and you've been a part of. And like, yeah, that's where they all came up with excuses, you know, for why they couldn't or why they had to get out of there. You know, it's so fast how those start flying. And that's where you learn character, because it's like there's always an excuse. There's always a reason why you couldn't do something. You know what I mean? That's, you could dig down deep enough, but it's like, but should I? You know what I mean? Like, what's most important? What's priority? And that's when it comes into play. It's like, what is priority? What actually matters right now? You know, it's like accountability for yourself. I did this, so I have to make it right. And there's even things from my past. Like, that's one of the biggest things that I feel bothers me is like some of the things from even back from my like childhood and stuff where I'm like, oh, I treated that person not so well, or I did this to this person, or I did that to that person. And it's like, that's not the person that I feel like I am. And it's like, I feel like I need to say something to reach back out to them, or because it just still bothers me because I know that's not the individual who I seek to be. So it's like, that's not true to me. And I feel wrong about the action.
I understand 100% where you're coming from, because I also have those same thoughts and those same feelings. But this is what I'm going to say to that. How do you know what those feelings are to that other person, to the point that it's not purely selfish on your personal guilt and your personal feelings? Like, to give you an example, if you wronged someone in the past and you just text them out of the blue and you're like, hey bro, I've been really thinking about this, I just wanted to apologize for what was going on, like blah 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 blah, say your piece. Like, you could just be bringing stuff up that they didn't want to be brought up. So where you
That's
think
true.
you're trying to remedy things, you could actually make things worse. And where it's purely good intention, like you're trying to mend things, but in their opinion, they didn't need things mended. Or it was something that like they just, it's going to take more than just a text per se.
Right. And that's very true, because that's how a lot of people that feel so guilty and they're just going to text it off. But it's like, no, like that, you're right. It's like, if you go meet them in person, you can gauge out how they're feeling and their body language. And if that's a conversation that needs to be had, or if you just be like, hey, I'm sorry I brought it up, we don't have to talk about it, you know, and hold it on to yourself.
And it's
if
a
you
lot
have
better.
an
It's a
in-person
lot better to
conversation,
have
do
those
that.
conversations in person than via text, especially like putting
Right.
something in writing that can just be taken so many different places. The internet gives you so much capabilities to take someone down by something they have said.
And that's, you see that environment even in work now, where it's like, it's this passive aggressive culture where people can't have hard conversations with one another, and it causes a bunch of problems, because it's like those hard conversations that you need to have usually only happen once or twice, and if they have to keep happening, then that person probably doesn't need to be there. But it's like, hard conversations, you only need to have them once or twice and it's done. But if you let them blow up, or if you turn them into text, which is interpretable in tons of different ways, like speech is so much more than the dialogue that we have. You know what I mean? It's the emotion, it's the body language, it's so much other things. And
And it's,
are you receptive and understanding? Like,
and it's because with speech, you can actually see and understand the emotion in real time, as opposed to like reading per se.
right.
Like reading, you can read emotions, but then you may not necessarily be reading the emotions correctly. That's where, like, especially a lot of people say that they're more of a visual person, that that they catch on more to like in person than to like via text. And some people it's quite the opposite. They're less of a visual person and they're more of a mechanical person. And I guess whatever the phrase would be in terms of like not being as visual and being more on like
they need the text to describe where the origin story of it is and everything. Yeah,
right. That's where you can't throw a blanket over anything, because that's cool and all, but what if you have those two people on the same team? You know what I mean? You can't say the whole team's going to sit there and use text, or the whole team is going to sit there and use dialogue. You have to find some kind of cohesive medium to both of that. And it's like, that's the mistake, is they want to do, like most places I've ever worked, it's always one way or the other. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't work for everybody's mind. That's the same thing we learn with school. School's the same way. Some kids can do great from learning textbooks and knowledge out of a book. Some kids need hands-on. They need to teach them at once with their hands in there and they know it. You know what I mean? Like,
absolutely. Well, it was like I was actually talking about this with my buddy yesterday. And like I think like where like the whole pandemic, everything that we've learned in terms of like splitting things to like from home, splitting things like in person, in terms of like schooling, I think that they should work towards having more of a balance of utilizing more online, because it gives the student more control in terms of like being able to access from their own home, or not necessarily like on campus where they have to make a trip per se. Utilizing more of that for the stuff that you really don't need to be in person for, using more of the in person for like the more hands-on, the more the visual, the more like what you need to see in person. Basically, I guess I'm saying like you should be able to do a lot of the math courses online. You don't necessarily, I mean, when you're like, yes, when you're there in a classroom, you can ask questions in real time. There are abilities that like, especially like just using Zoom and doing math through like a Zoom application where you can still ask questions. You can raise your hand. You can still ask questions in real time. You just don't have to be right there in the same place.
My only question with that is
it provides more of a balance to where it gives the student more control, that they don't feel confined, that they have to like they have
to be to the campus by a certain time, which means they can only work from here till this time, so they can get there by that time, and then you have to factor in weather.
Yes.
All the 9 yards that go to school.
I get that point. And speaking from someone who needed this in the household that I was, like, some kids need that structure. Like, that was one of my problems, was doing homework, because I never had any incentive at home to do homework. I never had like sit down, do it. You know, we did that for a little bit, but that wasn't the focus. And so it's like the only homework I'd ever get done is homework I did in school, or the only time I could pay attention. Wow. And it's like I needed that, but I didn't have that.
Or if structure. It was a group project and you had teammates who forced you to work on it.
Right. You know, and or if it really captured my interest. But the things that don't capture our interest, sometimes we need someone there, especially when you're a kid and you want to just go off and run off and do things, to help structure you a little bit. Not too much. You know, that's where I feel like we need to get away from that factory job setup and do some kind of, like you said, some kind of inter between with it. But as someone who's taken online courses in college, that was my least favorite, and my worst courses were the ones where I had to take them online, because I just deadlines everything. It was just not my cup of tea, and it was really hard to keep on track.
I would have to say a quarter of my degree was utilizing online courses, and I definitely felt more comfortable like doing math courses online as opposed to like in person.
I failed statistics twice online.
Thankfully, I only had to take it once, but to its point, that was in person.
I killed the math part and the homework. It's the discussion board, the requirements. Like, it's online for convenience, not to make it more work.
Okay.
Right.
That is something I understand, because that's where you take what is a very easily manageable 3-hour course, or 3 credit hour course, and you stretch it to where it feels like it's a 6 and 8 hour course, because it's
can't
just
take more than 2
consuming
classes
so
sometimes.
much, especially in terms of like, oh, you have to post on the discussion board, you have to do all this and you have to do all that. It simulates like going to class. Like, I guess I'm saying more like there should be more of an ability to have like lectures online where you don't have to be like right there in, and it's, oh yeah, especially for lecture halls, you don't have to pack these giant auditoriums with like 200 plus people to have one speaker that's just speaking, not taking any questions, and then you're going to have access to the PowerPoint online on their Blackboard, whatever computer application they chose later. But attendance is required.
That would go back to the class on top of that too, because I think that would be great. That would work for a lot of things that, like you said, like math and stuff that are a little bit more like symbolic, or like you're using symbols and stuff. But I feel like science, you would lose some of the impact by watching a video of it and not seeing it happen before your eyes.
That's
chemistry.
That's where it goes back to, if it's more of something that should be hands-on and should be visual,
right?
As opposed to
you can't throw a blanket over
can be shown to the masses per se.
Right. And then you could spend more of that in class time or that in school time on those areas and spend more at home time on the other areas that you don't need to.
Absolutely.
So exactly, it's some area of both, but they do have to do work on it as well.
And especially it teaches the student a little bit more accountability in terms of actually blocking the time that they need in order to do the course or whatever that they need to do. But they do it at their convenience. They don't have to go to a specific spot unless they can only access their internet from a specific spot. Then that's something that's a different factor.
You know, that's kind of the draw. That's what makes online classes more appealing, right? Is that it's at your convenience, but at your convenience equals double the work, double the, what if you've got the person who likes to do all their homework the first day of the week? They get it all taken care of. Discussion board, you've got to post, respond to 2 people, and then make another post. And it's like, these assholes aren't responding until the last day, the last 20 minutes. What am I supposed to do?
You got to follow suit.
That's where it goes back.
You got to join.
I'm definitely guilty of that myself. Is like, when it's things like that, I procrastinate, and that's hold myself accountable. Hold myself accountable, where it's like, no, there's a deadline. Like like you said, I do have to set up time because I am someone who's going to push it to the last minute or things like that.
Oh, absolutely.
It's me, that structure at that is like you said, it's a learned lesson, but certain people like need to be taught that as well. You know what I mean? Like, it's just not, that wasn't taught to them in their kind of world. That wasn't their world to have that kind of structure for something so intellectual. If they were someone who was focused more on chores and had to do more like labor and stuff for their household, like homework wasn't always, you know what I mean? That structured organizational time for something like that is something that needs to be instilled sometimes.
And I mean, to each their own. If it's something that's more of, if it's something that's more required for them to do, it's something that they will be doing more in repetition. It'll build more as a habit, and eventually as a recurrence.
I think
it
that
becomes your norm the more you do it.
Right. And that's where too, is I think that was the hard thing with online classes for me in college, is it was just dropped into it. There's probably like things I could go like after other things at the school that I could go look into how to balance my stuff more, but I never did those. But it was just like, here's an online course. And I'm like, oh, cool. That sounds neat. You know, I didn't understand the whole thing that went behind taking an online course and holding myself so accountable, and like how much responsibility it actually took to do that, you know, when I took the online course in the first place.
And nowadays you see so many different online courses that are offered for so many different things, but a lot of them are, you go at your own pace, and it like some of them are free, some of them you pay for. It just depends on what you're studying.
Right. And that's great for someone like, you know, me, like where it's like, even projects I do at my house that I want to get done, that I know how to do, I'm very sporadic. It's like, I'm working on this, and then it'll sit for a little bit, and then I'll go work on this, and then it'll sit for a little bit and come back. So it's like, it's this ability to consume when you need to, or how your brain works. Because sometimes you're just burnt out. You can't push that button no more.
Mm-hmm.
And if you try to force yourself to start a project and work it all the way to the end, sometimes, you're not as satisfied as you would have been if you may have set it off the side. If it's not important enough to finish like right now, if it doesn't have to be done right now, I can turn into something awesome later. Or you can rush it through and say, yeah, I finished it. It's done. It's off the list. I'm never doing it again because it sucked. You lose all that, all the value.
That fire can be nice once in a while though, because one of the last marketing pamphlets I had to make, there was a bunch of things that went on work where I couldn't work at it in my normal time. So I came in my day off and I had 4 hours. I was told I had 4 hours of extra work that I could dedicate to this. And whatever I had done with it, that's what we're running with. And it was kind of intimidating in the beginning, but after that 4 hours, I was really happy with what I turned out, and I turned it out in 4 hours, and that impressed me. And so it's challenging yourself. Sometimes those deadlines can be great as well, because you can surprise yourself, and that builds that confidence of what you're actually capable of.
Deadlines are important, I think, for a lot of things. But going back to the online class, I think that's kind of where things get blurred sometimes, because, deadlines, you think they're structured, but then you've got the discussion board thing. If you don't do that, you don't participate, you get kicked out of the class for attendance.
Right.
That was my
floating
problem.
Deadlines.
That's how I got dropped. I didn't fail my classes online. I got dropped because I wouldn't do the discussion boards.
Which is ridiculous because you paid them to take the class, and then they're telling you, well, you have to show up as much as we say. Doesn't matter how well you do. What do you mean?
Don't talk in class either.
I thought it was my knowledge retention. I thought that's what you were testing me on.
That is just.
Now that I think more about that, that's kind of like stealing.
That's MCC's policy too.
I mean,
it was the same.
But you signed the contract that says you agree to that.
You're not contributing to one of the requirements where all they have to do is send you an email and say, "Hey, I noticed that you haven't been contributing to the discussion board. Please start contributing to the discussion board. Otherwise, you could be at a risk of being dropped from the class for inactivity."
I'm sure they did.
Something,
but again, it was to an email account that I never used, but they forced you to use it. They wouldn't use your other email.
I mean, when I went to school, I had my school email as well, and I mean,
you went to school right after high school, though. I waited 6 years.
Did your schools have attendance?
Principals are not different in terms of.
Yeah, kinda.
Well, no, I'm saying I was also in school, that I also had a school email that I had to utilize, while I had my other emails that I utilized that were not part of school.
Did you use email a lot in high school?
Not as much in high school, way more in college, yes.
See, I didn't have the college email, so I had to make my own personal email, which became my primary, whereas your primary became your school email through that time.
I suppose, yeah, you can look at that, because I mean, I did have my emails going into college, towards sophomore, junior, senior year, I was using email more.
You're insane. I don't think I ever used email in high school that I can think of. I still had notebooks.
I mean, I suppose where we went to school, it didn't require it as much, but I know that I had my email because
I had a Yahoo
in order to sign up. Yeah, you had your Yahoo. I've had my Hotmail for as long as I can remember.
We had it for Xbox Live. We had to have it for Xbox Live.
Yeah,
that's true.
And that's
the only thing I use email for. Though I don't even like checking my personal one.
When you subscribe to other stuff.
Or especially
working on projects. How would you there were computers back when we were seniors, so group projects, yes, you would transfer files via email.
The only problem with the email is the delusion.
It depends on what the project was.
Yeah,
I guess there wasn't as much collaborative projects, but I want to say taking your senior English courses. I know that when I did, I suppose my research paper was individual, but I mean, I have it all.
I had to turn in printed copies, man.
You did have
when we graduated.
printed copies, but I guess I would also have to, I know that I had the emails, but maybe I wasn't using them 100%. But I swear in like senior year, I don't know. I have to think about the classes. I guess college was definitely more of like,
That's probably where you learned how to
group
use the email, like the way to do
projects.
it. Yeah.
and
See, that's
probably
kind of where I
more
felt
when
it too.
that is definitely more where I was learning more about it. And especially being part of a fraternity, that's how we communicated, was amongst
Right.
email.
So
In
you had
terms of like
reasons.
transferring files and stuff. Yeah, like eventually when Google Drive became a thing and we had everything in our Google Drive, and anyone
See, I
from
think that's
the
where
fraternity was
your,
able to access to a degree.
I
Depending
think your
depending
view
on
of
like
email
keyboard and that.
is what the original view of email was. That's how you use email. You use email. You're on top of your email, aren't you? You know who you've got email coming from and stuff.
I try. I mean, so when you start with one, and now at my point, I still have my school email because like you never lose that, I learned. And I've got my personal Gmail, I've got my Hotmail, I've got my Yahoo, I've got my Outlook, I've got my what else do I have? I think that's mostly about it. So what was that, like 5?
It sounded like it. That's a lot of emails. I have
At
one
a
that I
point,
use.
I need to sit like at a point I can definitely like reorganize them. I can use one email for like purely all my promotion, like all like the advertisements, all like the like shopping per se. I just have to sit down and do that. I know that that's what our friend Bash does. And
See, I think that's by
what
the
I
point
need
I
to
went
do.
to school and got a school email, my view of email was it's a place where garbage gets sent. I don't ever want
Right.
to check my own email. I'm not even going to check my school email because now I have to log out of my personal email to log into there.
That's what I was going to say. It's like it gets so diluted. Like any email that I ever have, like at first it starts off nice because nobody else has it than the people that you want to be getting mail from. I literally just had this conversation with my brother about my nieces with actual mail, because there is like, I sent them a gift in the mail and I was like, I hope they like it, to my brother. And he's like, they're just excited that you sent them mail. They never get mail.
Yeah,
And
they're
I
little
was like,
kids.
right. I felt the same way as a kid. I was like, it's awesome to get mail because it's someone that actually want to talk to you. But then when you become adult, you hate the mail. The mail is 90% junk, bills, and then once in a while someone will send you something. And it's the same thing with email, where it's like, if it was just all shit that was actually like I needed to know and priority and stuff, for like even my work email gets filled with Canva and promotions from all these different things that I need to have for my work stuff. But it makes my email so diluted where it's like it's an overwhelming.
You almost dread going into it.
Right.
I'm also
right.
used
You're gonna
to
have to filter
utilizing
and search
my work
and-
email, because almost every place that I've worked at, we utilize, and especially the place that I just came through, where we were cycling through 2,000 and 3,000 emails a day.
Now that's where I'm getting finally with my job. You know, my job has really forced me to use my email, but I still, it's not my, I mean, I'll send some emails throughout the day, but I don't send a lot.
Right.
Phone
I think
conversations
that
a lot with
depends on the job. Especially when I was working in insurance, I was getting emails coming in left and right from clients that had questions or like needed to make payments, and like sending me information, which majority of the time I wasn't taking payments via email. Like I was like, they were calling in, talking to us. We were making payments in real time. We were just arranging a time that like we can like talk about like stuff, or especially like documents. Like if they just needed to get me, like I send them an electronic copy of the document, they sign it. Some of my offices didn't use DocuSign or like use like Acrobat Pro DC Reader, that you can like electronically like sign this document. So sometimes I would tell them to sign the document, snap a picture of it, send it to my email, and then I can download it from there and do what I need to do.
I feel like email clouds the water a little bit, but at the same time, it can be your saving grace for a lot of things because it keeps track of stuff.
It needs to be utilized properly. Like, and especially when I was setting appointments for car dealerships, I was not using email as often. Like me personally was not sending any emails. It was purely me paying attention to specific emails coming through so that we knew what leads were about to come through that we were about to call, and especially like promotions that we needed to know. But then where I was at also kind of struggled because we had Microsoft Teams and we had like all these different we had these like different mediums that we were essentially like, we could have been utilizing like one place to like learn all our information as opposed to utilizing 3 different places. That's where you say it definitely muddied the water, because it was like, well, well, how did you not know? Like, you do something that, and you didn't know about like a recent update.
Which notebook did I write this in? Which notebook was that? When did you send that to me? Where'd that one come from?
When did you send that to me? Yeah, exactly.
Or
I didn't even send it. Sorry.
Or it was, oh, well, I put it in Teams. Did you check Teams? It's like, no, I thought for those updates, we were supposed to be checking our email. No, for this, it applies to this realm. So I put it in Teams. Oh, and then you have some people, well, I didn't check my Teams. I mean, when I was working there, I tried to stay on top of it because I knew things were coming through Teams. I knew things were coming through email, and I knew things were coming through like the software. So I just tried to stay on top of it. But you had some very traditional people that were like, oh, I don't use Teams, or I don't use this, I don't use that. It's like, how can you say you don't use the X, Y, or
how do you still work here?
Part of your job. Like, I mean, those are the questions that I asked, but it wasn't my position.
I can get that a little bit from them, where it's like, it depends how your establishment does it. If they clarify very clearly what goes in Teams and what goes in here, and there's a structure and an actual order for how everything should go, then perfect. Yeah, that person should be held accountable and they know the standard. But if there's no standard for what goes in Teams and they think it doesn't make any sense anyway, then I can understand their point where more, because it's like, dude, I don't know what goes in Teams. You've changed that every couple of weeks, because I've definitely been in places where when there's no order, it's very frustrating.
What's the convenience this week?
Right, exactly. Why are we doing this? Why are we doing this?
Oh, that doesn't matter. What's the flavor this week? What are we using this week? At least give me a heads up so I can keep up with you guys.
Right, exactly. Yeah, right.
That's all you can do.
But that's not a healthy work environment.
My job isn't to try to keep up with you. Exactly.
You're wasting time.
You know, I could be doing so many better things than trying to figure out where the thing went down.
Right.
You know,
and
some days I feel more like a detective.
And that's where
100%.
Realistically, it just comes down to communication. It comes down to properly conveying the message so that the person that you're conveying the message to is perceiving it the way that you want them to perceive it, so that you're all on the same page.
Which you can't do through text, which we already had a conversation about. You know what I mean? That's where email fails, is because it's like,
it's a lot
you
harder.
Can have that conversation, but you don't get emotion. You don't get any kind of body language or anything more, how serious is this? How important is this?
That's how you can consider an email too, though, is it's just text. But what are you going to do when you send somebody an email asking them for an answer on something? They come and talk to you about it. So you send that email off to someone else because of what they told you verbally. And all of a sudden it comes back, well, why the hell did you do that? Well, so-and-so said it. I would never say to do something like that.
Right. And that goes,
and that's
hearsay.
That is such an ingrained focus in a lot of these places. And it's because there are people that do that. It's ridiculous.
It is. There 100% are. 100%.
The worst is the boomers, because they're about to get out of it, and it's the survivability thing. They don't want to learn the technology. They don't want the responsibility because they don't want something to mess up the gravy train.
That's where I feel like what I would like is both. And I know it's a little bit excessive, but write me an email that's super, covers everything in deep detail, but have that conversation with me, because that conversation will lock in my brain. If you have, if it's like, especially if it's a small enough place where we work together and things like that.
That's the simple fix, is if somebody says something to you verbally and you have that conversation, it's like, awesome, can you send me all that in an email? And then I'll send it off.
Right. And it's boom. We've had the conversation. We've been able to clearly understand what we're saying. Now let's solidify it into an email and then go about it. And it's just like we get both worlds together, and that email has more emotion because it has clear understanding from two perceptions.
It honestly baffles me when I'm talking to like a company like scheduling an appointment for something per se. And especially like my old dentist office did not use email. I was like, how? It's 2000.
My dentist office doesn't send me
X.
emails. Now that you
But
mention
like,
that,
but it's okay. Like legitimately, it's the year 2021. And if
How much-
you are not utilizing email or doing something to a level of convenience for your clients, guess what? There are others that are. And if
How
you
much do you
don't
think-
start following suit, you're gonna get skipped.
that's true.
You gotta
That's
change
true.
with the times.
That is true. This is the era of convenience. I need my shit and I need it
Mhm.
now.
And
What do you mean
especially
you sent it
like
in the mail?
when I schedule an appointment, half the time
you-
I'm going to schedule that appointment on the phone with you. Yes, we just had that conversation, but as soon as I hit end call, majority of that conversation is going to be gone. So can you
Yep.
please send me a confirmation of this appointment to my email? And then maybe I'm someone that utilizes my calendar, someone that utilizes like different appointments and stuff that I can literally put it on my calendar. And then I will have it as a backup so that if I don't remember it in my memory, I have a backup like in something that can remind me.
But that's not the only way they can do it at the same time, because you have the counter to that, which is old people who may not have an email. There are some old people, or even some other people that are young, probably still,
And
who
to
don't
each
have an
their
email.
own, to each their
Right.
own. I can understand like coming from a perspective, if you don't have an email, then yes, let me write down your appointment on this
Or
card.
call you, like you said.
And then
Yeah.
you probably still use a calendar and you're going to pin this
Right.
to your calendar.
That's
I
my
get
aunt.
that.
She has 4 calendars, physical calendars in her house. Like that's how she keeps everything, is on physical calendars. Like how she's done it.
Sometimes that's what you got to do. And
That's
I
what
mean,
works for her, you know?
granted, whatever your system is for keeping your shit together is your system. I'm not gonna dog your system if it's working.
That's where you got to cater to everybody in some sense. You can't
What I am
break
gonna-
the business to do it.
What I am gonna dog is if you just treat your system like gold and you don't take input that you can improve, or if you can't do something to alter / improve your system.
You should,
have
you
no
always
faith?
should be trying to improve.
You don't think they know what they're doing? You don't think they found the gold standard, the one solve all to everybody's problems?
Like not putting my own opinions on it, but like someone that's strictly utilizing like a physical calendar could be accomplishing the same electronically, and then they have a backup. God forbid
could,
something
but-
happens, that calendar gets destroyed.
Do you
But
do
again,
a
it's
physical
like-
calendar for your computers? Do you have a physical version to back up in case your computer goes down and you can't access your digital stuff?
I do technically. This whiteboard that I can technically write as
Okay.
like anything that I make into, well, it's like it's a whiteboard calendar. So I basically like put the numbers as like whatever month it is. And then it does have that cork board
Okay.
lining.
Because that's the same too. Is like, like technology can go down all the time, especially if you're relying on internet for your storage or your interest. So it's like, or you have all your stuff on your phone and all of it's on there, and your phone gets smashed and destroyed, and you have to go a couple days, without all of your dates and all your things. Like that backup's necessary. A backup's always necessary, no matter the means.
Mm-hmm. That's what we're learning. And especially like as someone that has lost all of what they were working on because they didn't back it up, i.e. didn't save it per se.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's what saving is a backup and making it a file or whatever you want to call it. You definitely learn so that it doesn't happen. That doesn't happen.
That's
again.
why the save icon is still a floppy disk. The original
Yeah.
backup. The original
A hard
digital
copy.
backup. Yes.
Oh,
hard copy.
absolutely. But yeah, I think it's crazy that a lot of people will just have that mentality. It's the decisions that they're deciding to make. Like, hey, it's a system that you understand. That's awesome. Just also understand that there are other things that you could also probably understand, but that's up to you to decide. That's not up to me.
And even that, your way is not the only way.
Yeah.
Right.
Don't think you're God's gift to the earth, that your way works for every single person, because what I'm telling you is I'm proof that it's not, and it doesn't.
Right. There's more than one way to do a thing. Like 100%. And you got to be a little, it's moderation. It's everything. Because you got to be a little bit cocky. You got to believe your way is going to work. You know, you got to know that you're confident enough in your way to either be able to share with people. If someone's struggling and you're like, hey, I think your job could be, not saying you have to do this way, but hey, I think your life could be easier if you implement these things that I've learned. You don't have to do them, but hey, here it is.
It's
You know what
sharing
I mean?
knowledge. Maybe it's something they didn't know about.
And you have to be confident enough in your habit to share that with people in that way, and not too confident where you're telling them that's how they have to do it. And that's where it's like that middle ground moderation.
That is the thin line, because especially you get those people that you probably experience it all the time. Someone that is just really talking to you about something that you're perceiving that they truly understand. And it gets to the point where it's like, it's almost expected that like they want you to basically acknowledge like, yeah, what you're talking about, my God, it's Jones effect. It's basically Jones effect 101, except for it's not like saying like, oh, yeah, they probably have it in their speech as well. It's like, yeah, it's the latest thing. Like I almost felt, so I had a friend that called me earlier. In fact, I still am a little bit like, what was the purpose of him like telling me about this? But like, maybe he truly did like feel impacted by this product. But you might actually know some things about it. It's he was telling me about type 8 THC that is federally legal, because type 9 THC is what is not federally legal, and that's the type 9 that is what is sold in the dispensaries and stuff. But this type 8, which I asked him, and he couldn't give me a straight answer, but I'm like, okay, well, I know that in like smoke shops and stuff you can buy products that have less than like 0.03% THC, and I think what you're talking about, the type 8, must be defined as things that have less than 0.03% THC. He couldn't give me a straight answer.
So there's different, THC has different forms. Even like there's THCA, which is the unactivated form of THC,
right? And that's like THC. The sugar.
And so there's different forms of THC. And my concern, I haven't heard of that, but there's also like Delta 9s, which is a different form of THCs, and I haven't heard about the Delta 8, so it could just be a different form that's found. My concern is it's what's going on with a lot of these other chemicals, where someone in a lab is saying, well, this one's illegal, so we're going to make the one right next to it, and it's going to have similar properties, but we don't know all the downfall effects. So that's my only concern with it, is it's like, if it's legal, you know what I mean, and that's like its selling point. That's a big thing going on with those.
I feel like he was
some thin ground to stand on.
He was mostly just
right.
Like he was speaking to me like he had just like bought the cartridge, he had just smoked it, it tasted amazing. Like he was sharing the experience, but it just kind of like, and I guess he's in town. So I mean, it started out where I'm just kind of like, what is he about to like try and sell me on? But then it ended with him just generally sharing information, and it was something that like it impacted him as strongly, and I could sense that in his emotions that he was conveying over this phone call.
And that just goes, you know, back to informing yourself. Like anybody can be a good salesman, and that's where I have to watch myself too, is because I'm a good salesman, that's what I do, but I don't always need to be selling people, you know what I mean? So it's like, where were his intentions from? But my recommendation is, if it's not from a proprietor, don't buy a cartridge black market anymore. There's so much messed up stuff they're finding, especially in black markets. So unless it's coming from an actual distributor, I would recommend not buying, because even ones from distributors they're finding aren't still the best. So yeah.
Well, I mean, at this point in the game, at this stage of the game, if you're not giving me all the information on the cartridge, like on the packaging, guess what?
That's the
your
beauty
competition
of legalization. That's the beauty of legalization, because if you know
now that information needs to be published. It needs to be there. It's following the precedent of like, and I was just talking about this with with old coworkers not too long ago. A woman using hairspray for her hair ran out and thought that she could use this spray adhesive Gorilla Glue. as hairspray.
I saw something about that on Facebook. You're giving it context now.
And
it doesn't say it on the can.
it does not say anything about not intended for for like hair use per se on the can. Somehow like in my opinion, this person saw an opportunity, because it's already been the precedent has already been set because of McDonald's, because of the whole coffee incident. So if it's not on the packaging, then you can really take advantage of that. And that's, in my opinion, like, I'm not directly accusing this person of doing things. I'm just saying, when you put factors together, I could absolutely see, because now as a result, and this is what I am absolutely laughing about, is every single bottle of this spray adhesive Gorilla Glue is now going to say not intended for hair use.
You can't say common sense. It's putting a blanket on
it. Right.
I am just gonna. I mean, but at the end of the day, why wasn't that there? Because of where things are. But it needs to happen in order for it to be a problem.
That's like you hear whenever you see one of those signs where it's like, why is that sign there? But the reason is because somebody did that at some point. Somebody did that, and they had to make a sign. So every time, and then you see those all the time where it's like, someone, why? No, who would do that? Someone did that.
I tell people that all the time, especially when they're like, yeah, like such and such was like a thing, and it just, I didn't quite understand that. I'm like, yeah, but you have to think about it. The fact that that was there means that it was a problem previously. And they're like, oh yeah, I didn't really think about that. It's like, yeah. And especially like when you see like signs for like staying off, like please do not climb statue. There's probably a lot of people that were climbing that statue for it
probably used to be the place to climb.
A sign, and there's probably got to be people that are even watching, so that may make sure people are not breaking that rule.
And some people read those signs have to do exactly what it says. It's like you read that sign, and it's like, oh, now I got to climb that statue.
Right.
Now I have to do that.
But then
you try and tell me what to do, sign.
But then that guard comes around the corner, like, hey, you get down from there. Like when we were like that steamroller outside of the Walmart that one night.
Good old days.
It was. We all said we were gonna. At least I'm able to say that I have sat on a steamroller before the guy yelled at me and told me to get off.
You already done it. You already did what you know what I mean. You already done it. He yelled at you. You did, but you did what you came there to do.
I did.
You know what I mean? You were gonna go drive it. You just want to climb
carried through. I carried through. I like we agreed, and I carried through. And I would have been the one. It would have been me that was going away. He probably would have just ran away.
And that's where it's just accountability, because like to him you're a pain in the ass, but to you accomplished your goal that night. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's all
a matter of perspective.
Yep.
He probably just thought to myself, he probably just thought like, who is this kid and why is he on this steamroller? Like if I did turn it on legitimately, like I could have really messed some things up.
But if you took him and put him at your age and put him around that same steamroller,
probably would have done the same thing.
Do the same thing.
He probably would have. He probably would have done the same thing.
He was probably the guy driving it.
Right.
And I guess, yeah, who knows? I mean, he probably felt that he had to be a little bit strict in his voice. Like, he's like, I'm not just going to play on the steamroller. He's going to be like, hey, can you please get off of that? Like, please get off of that. Please don't you dare. Oh, you already turned it. Okay, well, please don't drive. Oh my God, you're already driving.
Well, and he's accountable for you.
That's it.
He's accountable for you because he's in security guard. He's in charge of people getting hurt and what's going on in that premises. So if you
something
go play on that and get hurt,
his ass.
He's accountable, and so he's taking a lot of. That's his job, you know.
Especially a kid that doesn't know how to drive a steamroller. If I fall down and get killed by that steamroller, ooh.
That or God forbid you turn it on next and they make it go. What's it gonna hit? What if it hits someone? What if it goes on the highway?
Literally,
right? You know.
The sky is the limit, and it's all on him. Exactly. You got to do it. Sometimes you got to do what you got to do.
Right. And same with you. You got to do what you got to do. You got to try to climb that steamroller. You know what I mean? Like,
got to have the place in time. Got to have the story, have the experience.
you got to have the inspirations, you know what I mean? And it's like, there's this, that's where, like we were talking before about those things I wish I could go back or change. And some of them, it's like, you know, I don't want to change because it's the ripple effect and the inspiration that you learn and the lesson that you learn. You're like, well, that's not me, or that's something that I don't enjoy, or that's something like this and this and this, but you needed to get it out of your system and learn that about yourself, you know?
Exactly. You know, that's all life is learning. Everything that we've done in our past has led us to be the person we are today. No matter how small, it's a part of us. You know, it makes us think about something a certain way because it happened to us this way.
We talked about this the other day in the sense of programming, like where your whole life you're slowly making little ones and zeros and these small little micro programs that you're teaching yourself like bit by bit. Because when things happen, you don't think about every single action that you're going to do. You're already programmed. You're already going to react because you've programmed how you're going to respond to that situation. Because
of something that's happened to you in the past that set that 1 or that 0.
Right. That little lesson, that mini little lesson that you might not thought much of that time, but it set in motion how you're going to react next time you run into that situation.
No kidding.
Which proves the theory that everything is made of waves.
Everything's vibrating. Rocks are vibrating. Like, yeah.
All accountable for our own waves, you know, how we use them.
Right.
And how we relay the waves.
Right.
I feel like we hammered out the accountability.
We did.
Everything we talked about related back to it.
Basically, yeah. At the end of the day, it comes down to making the decision. It comes down to following through on the decisions that you have made and understanding that there are going to be consequences / reactions to the decisions that you have made.
It's just natural physics, right?
Basically,
for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. No matter what you do, something will happen.
Basically, and it's a little bit self-centered for someone to believe that they can make decisions that won't impact other things, because every decision that you make has an impact on something, on another
thing. No, that's the perfect general term.
Yeah.
Another thing. That could be a person, it could be a project, it could be something you're building, it could be a time that something had to be met. You know,
we never did our finisher, but
that's okay. We're going to come up with it at some point.
Yes, we will.
That's what we said for the last 3 episodes.
Thanks for watching.
Exactly. We can't force it.
Right. Tune in next week. We're going to eat a horse. No, that's already been said.
Horses.
We can't do that. Two horses.
2.5.
2.5 horses.
2.5 horses.
2.5 horses and a quarter of a sheep. Yeah.